Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Fireside Chat, Cadurans. As usual, we're here with Mash, Sandro, myself, and for those who don't know about this series, what we usually do is we pick a topic and we discuss it just like we do every other day. Only now we are recording it because we think it would be interesting for the community and to create a little bit of debate. And today's topic is something that actually came up quite recently. We were having a conversation with a client, and they're trying to put in place certain practices, string programming. They're trying to adhere to some of those craftsmanship values, but they also have a very metric driven, organization. So they were asking the question of, how do you measure quality, right? Like, can we make sure that these things that we're trying to put in place are actually affecting what we want to affect? And we thought that was a very interesting question, and something that comes up not only that client but all across. No, and would like to share some thoughts on how we think about it and what kind of solutions we've found. So without further ado, why don't we start with defining a little bit what we mean by quality, and then we take it from there. I don't know, Sandro, Mash, who wants to jump in first?
Okay.
I will put Mash on spot because I want to see what the philosophical side of quality.
Well, how long have you got? I've been warned not to go down into the philosophical route too much, so I won't bore you with what Christopher Alexander and then the art of motorcycle maintenance and all those kind of things say. But I will take a practical thing, and it does point to actually some of the kind of philosophical side, is that quality is often mentioned as an event. When we think quality, we think something that is innate in an object. And actually, I like to think of it better as an event. And in fact, in Zen, the art of motorcycle maintenance, that's where I got the insight from. And what that means is that quality is something that happens when the observer or the user or the person experiencing is experiencing a particular object, and that event is quality. And the reason it has a very practical nature is because it talks about perspectives, right? Because an event is a reaction between two things. So a thing cannot simply have quality. It is about, and Sandro, you've mentioned it a few times, like quality to whom, right? So in software that we are talking about at the moment, when you talk about quality, you have to first qualify the event, right? What is the event? Is the event a developer adding the next feature? Is the event we are, as a team, deploying the next release? Or a person using the system? Or another system using a system? Or a business benefiting from the software that they've invested in? These are all different events. So when we start talking about quality, we have to first of all scope the event. What was that event? And from there onwards, you can quite easily start looking at the proxy metrics that would then help you understand whether that event was good or bad. And often, actually, it's easier to define the things that are negative, that make you say, oh, that's not good quality. So an example of that is a developer trying to change a feature, and they are unable to change it in a timely manner or unable to understand it. That's not good quality, right? And from there onwards, you can kind of start seeing, well, what would be better quality in that instance?
Mm-hmm. Cool. So there is something that is aligned to what you said, but I think I heard first time from, I think it's called Gerald. I never know how to pronounce his name properly. I was trying to write it down so I could read it. I think it's Gerald Weinberg. He wrote Secrets of Consulting. And he wrote loads of books like that. He passed away a few years ago. Like he was The way that he defined that, it was a very abstract way, but he said like quality is something of value to someone. And then I think it was Marcus Gardner, the guy that wrote the HDD book. He complemented that. He said like quality is something that is valuable to someone at some point in time. And I found that very insightful as well, because like over time, we value different things. And the things that we value the most, we have certain expectations, right? And we don't apply the same expectation across everything. So even when we go to a supermarket, for example, another metaphor here, but like there are certain things when I go to the supermarket that I will take the cheapest, right? Whatever is in there, like, I don't know, butter. Let's say that I don't care much about butter, I'll get the cheapest. But there is olive oil, that is a thing that I really like, and I'll get not necessarily the most expensive, but I'll take the one that meets my expectations. And I normally have higher expectations because it's a thing that I like more, which means I generally understand more. And that you can apply to everything, to cars, to houses and stuff. So there are things that you are willing to invest more because you understand more, you like more, you care more. And other things that say, you know what, this thing I don't care that much. And that changes over time as well. So that's how they define quality. There's something that is valuable to someone at some point in time.
I like a lot both of the approaches, because it's not only something that is based on the perspective of the person, experiencing this event, no, or looking at the characteristic, if you want to call it, no. It's something that changes over time, because that perspective also changes over time, no, and that context in which you're doing it also changes over time. Although most of the definitions are very abstract, and I think this is where the problem comes in, right? Because they're too generic. Yeah, yes, they fit, how we want to describe the concept, but then when you're trying to turn it into something tangible, like I want a number, no, or I want something that I can.
I want to know where I am with my quality,
exactly,
right? So
exactly. I want to know what the progress is. I want to know, no, like these things, these questions that I'm trying to answer. Then it becomes difficult to find one or two metrics that sort of represent all of that, no, because precisely because you're talking about different perspectives, then you can talk about quality at different levels within what you're doing at the same time, no. You mentioned that, no, that those perspectives, no, is it we're delivering features, is it the business, is it the no, and based on those perspectives, then maybe you want to be looking at different things, right? And the number that the things that you be objectively looking at may be very different from one another, right? And so this idea of having a consistent view of quality, I think is important. Not everyone has in their mind that you're not talking about a single thing, right? Like it has all of these areas around it, no, that you do want to look at depending on what your perspective is, right?
Yeah.
So taking it further then, so why do you think this question comes up, right? Like what do you think people are trying to achieve when they want to measure quality at whatever level, no?
I personally think it's about an experience, and quality is the word that we always use to mean that we are having that something will meet our expectations, as Sandro was saying, whatever those expectations may be. And because our expectations are quite uh, intangible in a way, there are it's instinctive, you feel it, and it's all at different times different things matter to you. So we find it difficult to pin down what exactly that we are looking for. So then we reach for the more vague, abstract notion of quality, and then we just use the word quality. I want to measure quality, but in your mind you've got a number of things that are important now. You know that something else was important earlier, and so on. So I personally don't think it helps to say how do we measure quality? I think we need to be a bit more concise in what is it that we want. Yeah. So, is it that we want to be able to, as I was saying before, change and add features more quickly, right? And it's not just one thing. We may want a number of things. So we should go down into that and say, well, okay, of all the things that are important, what are the things as a collective, which is basically the organization, including all aspects, business, any other users, developers, people operating, so on, right? What are the things that are important to all of them? And then start prioritizing, because you can't, it's about investment as well. Measuring and reacting on that feedback is a lot of investment. And so you can't measure everything. And even if you could not address everything. So measuring everything is not even necessary. So then what do you measure? And sorry, go on, Sandro.
No. Just I thought you were finished.
So I was just saying that at that time you can start reaching out for some more standard measures, right? People have thought about this. Everyone's been thinking about it. This they've been and there are lots of little metrics running about. And then you can start thinking about what are the standard, more well-recognized metrics, maybe some research behind them, and the 4 key metrics come to mind as well, that can actually be a good starter.
But even before you go, I think you brought up a really good point, which is we need to be aligned on what, as a collective, we think is what matters. No,
Mm-hmm.
and that's an important thing before you start choosing anything. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are the different. Just what Mesh was saying. There are things that might frustrate us. So, for example, sometimes the need to measure quality comes from the frustration that we are not able to do something, or doing something is very difficult. So examples, just to keep the conversation a little bit more on the concrete side. For example, we are not able to test our system fast enough. Or as Mesh mentioned, another example, we are not able to deliver things fast enough, or we are not able to maximize the work, the parallelization. We are not able to parallelize the work across teams. Or as a developer perspective, you say like, look, I find it's very painful to maintain this code. Every time that I need to come to this area of the code base or this system is always very difficult for me. So those comes from things that you want to do better and you are not able to. And normally we end up thinking we don't have quality in this area, right? So we associate quality to something that we don't have. Often, like normally what I'm saying, like that's why in our experience, when people say I want to start measuring quality, that is the main driver, is that they are not able to do something. If they were happy with how they were working and performing, very rarely they would say I want to measure quality, right? So this is one aspect. But then there is the aspect of when you are frustrated with something. Let's take testing. That is the most common thing. So people say, oh, we don't have a good set of test automation, or we don't have a lot of automated tests and so on and so forth. So we don't have quality. This is one problem, right? So, but if we address this problem in specific, does it mean we have quality, or does it mean that we just have a good test suite? So we have quality in that area. So we are really looking quality as specific areas, or we are looking at quality holistically, because that changes as well. And then I also think that there are different levels of quality as well. So mainly when people come to, like clients or even our own teams, they say, oh, we need quality. Quality at which level? At the low level in terms of the code and the unit tests of that units of code, or at higher levels, all the way to architecture, business value and stuff. So there are different things that we can address here as well.
Mm. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, this brings up one topic that I think you cross through is, should you focus when measuring quality on outcomes, or should you focus on behaviors, right? And this is an important aspect, because a lot of the time people tend to measure, behaviors and so on, right? Like things like, are you writing tests? What's the coverage, and that kind of no, a low level metric, no. But the outcome, which is, I'm not able to do X, I'm not able to, no, like these things that you're trying to achieve but are not able to get to, is kind of where you want to go. It doesn't matter then, what the coverage is, or how many tests you're writing, or no, if you're not able to perform those things, right? And that's an important point that I think, again, people focus on what they can measure. No, to some extent, where no, I install, I don't know, SonarQube, and it's gonna tell me, coverage and all of these things. And that's the easy part of trying to do it, but that's not really telling you how the outcome is going to evolve, or how, whether you're reaching that or not.
Yeah, I have a real issue with the term quality assurance engineer, right? It's like quality assurance has a role. It could exist, and we've kind of looked at maybe we'll talk about that later as well. But like as you were mentioning, behavior or activities that are then considered to be quality, right? So testing, testing to be calling that quality assurance is not quality assurance. It's an activity that we think may help us achieve some kind of quality which is more related to the outcomes. But actually, why do we test? We test because we want to verify that that we don't have defects, or that we want to focus the code if you're talking about test-driven development, or we test because we think it's a good practice, right? But it doesn't actually. The real reason for testing is that it makes change easier and reliable, right? But we don't. How do you measure that? We don't actually measure. We measure test coverage. We often measure how long it takes for us to run the tests, but we don't how do you measure on whether that's making the system more reliable and easy to change? They are difficult, and we don't look at that.
In this case, I think that specifically talking about the test, for what you mentioned, Mash, test is one of the enablers, but not the only enabler.
That's right.
Right. So, but maybe there is something in between. So, because if you move to the definition of quality, let's say too high up to the point that it becomes too abstract, then there's no way that we can measure. And so then I agree with the point that where you're coming from. But maybe there is something in between the two. So, for example, if we want to know after a change, or every time you make a change, how quickly can we know that our system is stable and can be deployed to production? Right? So that means how quickly can we test the entire system so that we are confident that we didn't introduce any bug, or there's no any loss of behavior or vulnerability, so that we can release a new version. So this we can measure. It's not all the way to where you went to in the process, but like if you reduce the scope somewhat in between, I said like, so why do we need tests? Well, I want to make sure that every time that I make a change, my system is ready to be used, right? So it, given whatever criteria is. And then you can measure how quickly you can answer that question. We are confident that our system can be shipped to production, given that all the features that we want, or vulnerabilities or whatever, are satisfied. So that we can measure, and that's a much better metric, let's say, than the code coverage, because you can achieve that. This is what we were discussing with one of the clients, because we were talking about the regulators, and the regulators wanted to say, look, we want to know if the system is compliant to the certifications and regulations, and that doesn't have any vulnerability, and all the features work. You can achieve that in multiple ways. You can achieve that with a manual process that can take a month, or you can achieve that on the other extreme with an automated process that can take maybe a few minutes or maybe a couple of hours, depending on the size of the system and stuff. But the end result is the same. You can answer that question, can be certain that your system satisfied those criteria.
Mm-hmm.
But then you can measure how fast you get to that answer.
Yeah, I think I'd add to it a bit. I personally think that yes, the metric should be more should be related to how quickly we can make the change, right, in a reliable way. So it's actually related to lead time, because actually, if you just look at how quickly I can verify the change, you're not counting the effort it takes to make the change. The reason I say that is that sometimes you may have really good fast running test coverage, yeah, but actually those tests make your code very difficult to change.
Mesh, so sorry, just because like when you gave the example, I mentioned that the testing would be just one of the things that would lead to what you said. So the combination of other things would lead to what you want, and that's the lead time, for example, is another aspect. So there will be multiple aspects. I was not saying that was the only one.
Yeah,
just to complement.
because like that's why actually I like the lead time as a metric, because it's not too vague. It's something you can measure, but it leaves it to for you to decide how you are gonna get to it. Because, for example, like automated testing, which we consider a very good practice in a lot of cases, but it's not like a fundamental truth. It may not be applicable or may not be the right thing in some situations, right? So, because what you're really looking for is that, I have a feature, I want to make the change, I want to make it as quickly as possible, and it needs to be reliable. So, the other stuff like defect, change failure rate, those kind of things kind of play into that. So that level is a better level, because it's not, as in my opinion, it's not as prescriptive.
It is a better level in terms of business. I like that, for example, because they are in a different level as well. It's because like they are more of the business level. How we as a company or as an IT department or whatever, how are we performing at that? So that those are good indicators at more of the business level, the return on investment, how we are doing as a department. But they alone, they don't give you the information, as you were saying. So then we need you to break, for example, let's say that we don't like the lead time. The lead time is whatever, a month. Right? Let's say, just to give a random number here. And we might be happy or unhappy about that lead time. If in case we are unhappy, then that metric alone say, okay, yeah, we are unhappy, but like, why? Then we need to go and say, like, what the whole, what is it called? The value stream mapping, and try to figure out, okay, where are the bottlenecks? Where are we expending time so that we don't? And then we have more local metrics. Then we will need to increase the quality. Let's say that we figured out that testing is what is taking out of this month in the lead time. Testing is the one that is taking longer, because it takes 2 weeks, and it feeds as they find issues, it will generate rework.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So then we need to localize more attention and metrics and improve the process in that area.
Yeah, no, certainly. So you need to go to the next level, which is basically the cycle time in each stage, or even looking at the queues, the work building up, all those kind of lean aspects. I think what I was trying to say is that if you had to just say, well, what kind of metric to capture, you'd say, well, there's like capture lead time, but then look at your value stream to see, where the bottlenecks are, and you may not be able to see where the bottlenecks are, but what you can start thinking, well, what kind of things should I be measuring in order to see what the bottlenecks are? And that's when you start understanding the next level of kind of measures that you need to have in place, so that when you have this thing, well, I don't have the right lead time, then, well, what are the levers that I can actually pull in order to reduce that lead time, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to add two more things in here. One is that we talked about ROI, no, because in the end, some of the questions that you're trying to answer are related to that. No, is this investment worth it? No, is this helping me in some way as a business? No, and one of the things that I see with quality and I'm working on this is that some of it is very tangible, and some of it is intangible as well, right? And those are harder to. No, I'll give an example. Let's say you have a pill that cures some disease, right? But it's not tested. It hasn't gone through any, a regulator or anything. No, you don't know if there are going to be side effects. You don't know. No, that has a value, right? Like if it works, you take the pill. However, once it goes through that process, the value increases because now you are sure it's the same pill. Nothing changed in the composition of the thing, right? But just the fact that it went through that process, no, of ensuring, and they call it, makes it more valuable. No? It makes it, if people will feel easier about taking it. They will know that all that stuff, right? So there is an intangible part there, yeah, of that safety or that peace of mind, if you want to call it. And it happens with software as well, right? When we talk about being afraid of changing the code or being afraid of putting out new features or doing a release, that is not only how fast we're able to do it, but how do people feel when they have to do that. And that for me also has value, right? People are stressed all the time. That's not going to be very helpful on the no.
But I think it's the value from the different perspectives. I think that's what we were talking at the beginning. So, for example, from the people that are making the investment, they are worried about the process, but there are the people that are building the different parts of the solution. So each person involved in the process, they have their notion of quality, because there are certain things that will impede them to do a good job, or the job the way that they wanted to do. And that's so they will build their own set of frustrations or needs, and that will translate to their own notion of quality. As you were saying, a developer trying to work fast in a code base, or even a tester be able to easily test the system, or and things like that, or try to isolate their changes.
Sorry, this feeling. Go on, Jose.
No. Just to come back to that, is like, but the point I was trying to make is that some of these things are easier to measure than others, right? Like these things that I'm talking about may not necessarily reflect in the kind of metrics that people usually use. Is what I was trying to convey.
Well, I have a slightly different opinion. There are certain things that are intangible, but these kind of feelings come from fear, right? So, of course, a lot of other things can be wrong in a team. So there might be other issues why people are uncomfortable doing the job that they, of software development, operation, all the roles that we have in software delivery. But just looking at it from a software perspective, this fear is driven from things going wrong, right? So things going wrong in terms of defects, things going wrong because certain event or thing happen that I can't see. So the observability aspects, you basically you don't feel like you have control, right? Because I'm doing something, I will do it, but something may go wrong, either in terms of defects and those concrete kind of problems in production, that kind of stuff, or to do with delivery, that the expectation is that this needs to be done in a couple of days, but actually it may take me a month. So if you can start thinking about I personally think you can measure these things that provide more or less control, and work on those, and they in turn feed into whether someone is comfortable in a particular role or not.
Yeah, there is an element. What makes it difficult sometimes is that, let's say you take, let's say 5 developers or 5 testers or 5 BAs or 5 people doing the same kind of job. They also have different perspectives of what quality is. So put 10 developers in a room and ask what good code looks like. Right, so they will have very different views on what good code looks like. So sometimes even standardizing, let's say that those people have the power to change the area that they're working on according to their needs. Just trying to agree on that quality is very difficult. And then there are different levels of quality. I'll try to be a bit more specific, just to keep that focus on the software process. But code standards, for example, is a pain to create, right? So because I like having coding standards, because then allows me to, every part of the code base that I go to, it's, well, ideally it would look like as if it was written by a single person. But I would also like that the way that single person writes the code is the way that I like the code to be written, right? so that's where the complication gets. So for example, there is an alignment across people doing similar jobs. So they will need to sit down and say, look, this is what we consider quality for us. And they will need to compromise as well. So there is an alignment that needs to be in there. And certain things are easy to enforce. So I would also like to, I don't want to take too much time, but like I would like to emphasize, like with more concrete examples, when you go to the software itself or the software process, the different levels, because one of the most common things for us to hear when people are talking about quality, they talk about the quality of the code or the quality of the tests. But that's in the very, very low level, right? And in the low level, there are certain things that could be easily measured and others that cannot. For example, the Sonar, Jose, you mentioned Sonar Cube, and like mainly people using statically typed languages, like in Java, we have a very rich suite of tools for the static analysis tools, right? So then the teams can agree on metrics that are about the structure of the code itself, but not the semantics of the code. They can see like how each class and method is going to be written, the kind of test they should have and stuff, but it would be very difficult, for example, to agree on what the overall design you have for each part of the system. This is a more subjective thing. This is a thing that tools will struggle to measure because you have a domain. You need to map a domain or something like that. And then there are other areas. I just want to very quickly finish, because when we were speaking to this client, and very specific, this client asked, okay, you guys are very good in, you praise craftsmanship and test-driven development and extreme programming. How do you measure quality? And one of the things that we were explaining were there is quality in the small. And quality in the small is what I was talking about. It's the code base, it's how the code looks like, and the unit tests for those units, and so on and so forth. That is the small. And that, for me, can be unified across a code base or across systems. The team should be able to reach an agreement at that small level. But when we go to a few levels up, I was giving an example of a client that we have where we have 4 different teams working in parallel. Moving quality bar upwards a bit, for example, in one of those departments, quality for that department at that point in time was testing. They had a very complex system, and the manual process takes a very, very, very long time. So for them at that point, quality would mean we would like to have a more reliable and faster automated test suite. And that's what's being done in that area. In another area, for example, they had a problem with performance. They deal with millions and millions of transactions, and they have a very complex set of systems that talk to each other. So quality in that department at that level was a matter of simplifying the architecture that would touch 3 different systems, but the objective was to have a more a system that could perform and scale better and benefit from the cloud. It would be more cloud native service. So there was an architectural change in there to satisfy those quality needs. And another team, for example, they had a group of people working in the same area, and they were struggling to parallelize work. The code was really complicated. So was to restructure the code in a way that is easy to parallelize work, but most importantly, also to deal with regulatory compliance to regulations and certifications easier in that area as well, that today is too mixed. So as you can see, there are 3, like I just gave an example of 3 of the 4 teams, just not to take too much time, but like the notion of quality in those areas at a higher level, a bit above the code, is different. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would say is another area to look for quality is quality at the level of skill. Because when you were talking about static code analysis, I've done that in teams a lot in the past. And one thing that if we could go back in those days to actually start thinking about why do we have to put these static code analysis in place? Because one is that, the team would make an agreement, and what we are doing is we are codifying that agreement. But these things, these analysis, we had like things like JDepend and those kind of things that actually would fail the build if you followed certain types of kind of package patterns and architectural patterns and those kind of things, or if you had a constructor with 20 arguments and that kind of stuff, right? And thinking back on it, actually the problem here is not related to shall we kind of have this kind of static analysis tool. It's more about the skill of the individuals or in the team who think that who have different ideas of code quality at that lower level. So this is where I'm thinking about quality of the skill of individuals within a team, and how do you then get to a standard level of understanding on what makes good design? We call that micro design, like at the code level. What makes good design and what doesn't make good design, right? And this is where I personally prefer more abstract notions and things like coupling and cohesion and so on, where you can talk to people and even have people understand whether this piece of code is good or not, without having to go right down to the number of lines in a method or the number of arguments in a thing, because I think they're a bit too arbitrary, or they can be right or wrong. But if you talk more about a higher level concept, even at the core design, and people's skills level are high enough to be able to understand that and have the discussions at that level, it would be much better than certain code analysis or metrics.
You brought up one topic there that I think is quite important, which is what you choose to measure sort of like will generate certain behaviors. Now, and if you're measuring how many lines are in a method, people tend to comply with that, or to cheat the metric, if you want, to some extent. And this is an important thing to think about when choosing what kind of metrics you want to look at when observing that quality based on your perspective. Is that what you choose to measure will generate certain behaviors that you may not want. Right?
Yeah.
So this is why things like you mentioned before, lead time and so on, which are metrics that to some extent cross boundaries and sort of like give you an idea of the whole system, how the whole system works, yeah, and not so much at the level of detail, are better suited for that, no, because you end up with optimizing the system as a whole and not so much the individual, no, the silos or components. The same with, you mentioned coupling and cohesion. To some extent, for me, that's kind of similar than just going into the patterns that you're using or so on. And there's another aspect of that, which is when quality or that metric becomes the objective, no. And this is another point, right? Like we talked about quality as a way to achieve an outcome, and a lot of times we see that people tend to make quality, the thing that they're after, instead of the outcome, and this just being a means to an end, right? And yeah, could you share a bit about some of your experience? I have a couple of examples, but yeah.
I would like to just to say one thing. First of all, I don't want to give the impression that I think that the static analysis tools are the solution. That was not where I was coming from. And I, in general, I agree with everything we both said. But there are a few things, there are a few caveats in here. Mm-hmm. So education, I'm totally for it. Like Mash, well, anyone that knows Cogenius well and us well, we know how much we care about our own education and our crafts, let's say. But we also understand that this takes a long time. So let's say one thing is to say you have a small team, all focus on the craft and agile and stuff. Another thing to say is just, hey, we have an organization that has hundreds of developers, and educating them all to a level where they understand the fundamentals. So this is, forget it. Like this is going to take years, and you might not even get that return because those people are going to move to other companies, new ones will come and stuff. So having certain things, there are quality gates. And again, I'm not in favor of them in general. So I personally feel extremely constrained with things like SonarQube. And I would be really frustrated if I'm working with a very small team and SonarQube is every now and again failing our builds because we put like one argument in a constructor that in that case we felt that it made sense. But in general, when you look at like other contexts, and some of our clients have those contexts, certain things that would fail the build because someone is creating a method that are gigantic or you don't have a certain level of unit test, it's a way for you to try to stop the bleeding a bit, to control the massive accumulation of technical data a bit. It's not going to solve anything. I'm not saying that those metrics are going to make the code that they are writing better. They are going to gain the metrics and stuff. They're going to do all sorts of stuff. But at least it's a way for you to start controlling the accumulation a bit.
Yeah.
Until you can catch up with the education, because it will take a long time.
No, that I was totally. I had exactly that. When you were saying that, is that you will need to do certain tactical things to stop the bleeding, as it were. But then once you have stopped the bleeding, or you think that you have done enough, is to start looking at these things, which as I think is as Jose was saying as well. Like if you start, as soon as you put a measure in place, people will. I wouldn't even say cheat the measure or game the measure. I think I'd like to say that they address the measure, right? So their behaviors will change accordingly. And so, as soon as you start putting these things in, because a lot of the times I have seen, you are stopping the bleeding in Sonar builds, for example, putting those things in, and then certain people just spend so much energy on that, or teams spend so much energy on that they forget sometimes that actually this is the poultice. This is, it's not this kind of, it's just to stop the bleeding, and other things need to be done, which is that, that mess was created by that team or that, organization. And in order to, we have actually stopped them from making the mess, but in a kind of a tactical way.
Not
Okay, how do
addressing
we then?
not
Sorry.
addressing the root cause, let's say.
Yes, exactly.
It's like superficial. You're treating the symptom, no, to some extent, but you're not the root cause of it.
Yeah, and you need to treat the symptom, because you can't be living in pain while you're addressing it. But then you start, and I like the idea of actually measuring the skill levels of your organization and the teams. We talk about, for example, in our own teams and Codurance teams, we talk about if the skill gap, which is the needed level of skills for the challenge, and the skill that people have, and if there is a gap, and this is something that we monitor quite closely, because actually when you start looking at these things, you start then addressing those kind of more root causes. But in order to get there, you need to have, stop the bleeding. And also totally agree, it is related to scale as well. You can't, if you have a lot of hundreds of developers working on the same system with a really wide spectrum of skills, you can't just say, okay, we'll educate them and it will take as long as it takes. Meanwhile, the thing is getting worse and worse to a grinding halt.
There is another conversation I had recently with one of our clients. He had the need, the person that is heading that department, this person had the need to monitor not necessarily the velocity, but he was a bit worried that the teams are not completing the stories every sprint. And he was trying to understand that or get the metrics around that area. So we had a very interesting conversation. And what I was saying was, why, for example, he was worried that the teams were not finishing what they promised in the sprint, right? And here you have a problem. And this is what I was really worried about, what he could do. And because in one hand, you might have a team that is trying to overcommit. It's a team that is really eager to do more and more, and they want to do more. So that's why they are bringing more things that they can do, because they really feel that they can do more. Not often they achieve that, but they like the idea of trying to achieve the maximum that they want in a sprint, right? So this is an example, assuming that that's the case for the team, right? Bringing a metric in and not necessarily punish the team, but like say to the team that is not a good idea to have things that were not finished in the sprint, would actually make the team work in a way that is less productive to the company, because now the team will say, you know what, we are going to commit to less, or we are going to start overestimating our thing so that we will finish faster. So they will have their metrics, but we will be doing less in a way. So on the other hand, you might have a scenario where the team is not disciplined enough. Maybe they're not paying attention enough to the requirements. Maybe the root cause of not finishing the task is because they are not putting enough effort, let's say, in clarifying the requirements, or maybe there are recurring issues that are blocking them during the sprint that don't allow them to progress. So I think that there is an importance in looking at those metrics, let's say, but more in order to identify what's going on, is to get more knowledge of what's happening and then address the root cause, but not keep people to, oh, you didn't reach those numbers. You know what I'm saying?
No, totally. And certain metrics are very are conducive to actually addressing the root causes, and others are not. Like velocity is and again, it's my view, but it's a terrible metric. Yeah. It is often used. We internally say, it should be for the team. But externally, people are looking at it all the time and making business decisions and putting deadlines in place and all sorts of things. What I'm trying to say is that it's not that other, people, stakeholders and so on should not be interested on the performance of the team and the return on investment they're getting and all those kind of things. But using a metric like velocity is just going to create bad behaviors. The kind of things that they should be looking at is more related to like waste that's building up in the team, right? The certain trends on how long change is taking, or particular types of changes is taking, the level of skill within it, or work building up it at different stages, and those kind of things, I think, would allow them to see more, kind of like give them better insights than to look at something like velocity. I think. I'm just picking that as a metric, but what I'm trying to say is that not all metrics are equal. Certain things will point and help you see kind of, let's say, root cause issues in a positive way, so you can help the team. Others are more about a blame, right? It's more about kind of judging the team from the outside without any real help for the team.
Yeah. I just want you to also to add that this person specifically, this person, the client, as we evolve the conversation, he actually had the right mindset, because he said, like, I don't like measuring everything. I think is not useful at all. Like, but we are almost on the other extreme. We don't measure anything. And then as we evolve the conversation, and then he actually verbalized, he said, like, actually, what I really want, I want a steady flow. I want predictability. I would like to see teams. He said, I don't even care about Scrum or the sprints. We use sprints, but like for me, like I don't care. What I would like to see is like pieces of work going through the pipe, in a predictable fashion. And he said, I just need to start measuring something to see if I learn what's going on, and then know where to look at. See what I'm saying? So he actually had the right mindset, but sometimes it leads to, let's measure velocity. It was not where he was coming from, but he had to start measuring something to know where to dig deeper, let's say. But ultimately, what he wanted was predictability and flow.
So actually, there is a book called Flow. Actually, it's about I think it's called Lean Product Development, Jose, or I can't remember the name.
Principles of Product Development Flow.
Yeah. So actually, it's there is an element in there, because we talked about flow is a really good thing to look at, because you start looking at where the bottlenecks are, where the problems are that you need to fix in order to make the team or the process perform better, right? In there, actually, I vaguely remember, it was a while ago when I read it, is that they talk about, like, sometimes we think predictability is what we are trying to achieve. Actually, when you start looking at the root causes, you start realizing that certain things will come in that are of different sizes, and you may not get predictability, but what you get is a confidence that this thing is taking as long as it should. I think this is what you're looking for, right?
Not more, not less.
Exactly. That's the confidence, that feeling, because often when you start looking at things, metrics and so on, is that you're losing confidence that things are taking too long, or they're too unreliable, or there are too many things in the way, that kind of thing. So your expectation is that it should not take as long as it is taking, or it should be more reliable than it is. Those kind of expectations, they're not matching. And then you start thinking, well, how do I understand it? And then you start thinking, well, I need predictability. But
because you cannot even plan, right? Ultimately, this is another aspect. So if you don't have that predictability, how do you plan? How do you come up with a strategy for your department, for your product, for your organization? If you don't understand, if you don't have predictability in how you do things, right? Yeah. It's impossible to plan.
Yeah, and I mean, it's also planning at what stage, isn't it? It's like it's actually even because a lot of the deadlines that we create, even in the planning stage, they are more often they're internal. I mean, there is definitely this element of the opportunity cost, right? So when you are doing something, what is the opportunity cost, or what's the cost of delay? Often in lean they talk about that, right? And how you prioritize. And even with the planning, actually, when you go down to this kind of steady flow of things, one of the things that this idea of flow, and in lean is about creating the pull, is that you can make really good decisions on what the cost of delay for certain things is, and then put and prioritize accordingly, because the next feature may take 5 months, but the one after that may take 2 days. But do you want that 2 days one? Because the 5 months one, the cost of delay of even 2 days delay might be much higher than adding the 2-day feature in. So kind of when we talk about planning, we also need to understand what are we trying to achieve with the planning. Of course, there are organizational issues in the end, like the organization, there might be a very rigid budget, and then you have to work within that and so on. But then that's a bigger problem. But even with the planning, what are we trying to achieve, right? And kind of creating this flow as he kind of started looking at that. That's what I want. I want a steady stream of flow so I can make timely decisions on what's coming next based on my business needs. And that's what you're trying to create within your team.
This is quite interesting, Matt, because a lot of the times quality has a relationship with that. Now, usually when you talk about planning, you talk of the iron triangle. No, it's like the features, the budget. No, you mentioned all of that, but then quality is like the hidden dimension. No, and a lot of people are like, oh well, if we have everything fixed, then the quality needs to drop, right? And I think we all agree in this call, no, that quality is very important. No, we all feel strongly about it. No, but it's also something that could help improve that flow that we're talking about. No? And this is where things, going back to a point that I raised before, like when quality becomes the objective and not the means to an end, because you can have that quality not only at different levels, no, but that experience that we were talking about can be gradual as well, right? It doesn't need to start in the greatest experience ever from the beginning, right? It can be slowly built, yeah, and you can make strategic choices around how you want to address that quality, no? And this is where having being pragmatic about the solution that you're building, no, and understanding what are the constraints that you're working with, no? And being able to adapt to that context. It's not about sacrificing, it's about making strategic decisions about how you want to implement those things, knowing well what it is that you're choosing, right? And if you have a feature, no, going back to your example, no, this 2-day feature or whatever, no, the cost of maybe the 2-day feature, yeah, can be implemented in a different way, which it's also acceptable, yeah, right, and would reduce that, and you get that flow. This is no longer about whether I sequencing, no, like whether I do this first or the other one first. If you can do that, that's perfect, no. But I feel like that's an aspect, no, of quality as well, that is important to understand, that there are many ways in which you can achieve that experience, no, or that safety net, or that overall experience, no, and choosing the right approach to deal with the constraints in which you're working is very important, right? Like, let's say you get a new team that's never done TDD or any kind of testing, no, and if you from the beginning start like demanding the highest level, that's just going to create a clash, right? Like that's not going to be helpful in the short term. Maybe in the long term, if people stay, no, and they kind of like go through that bump, they will get to where you want them to be, right? But there's a process, right? Like that will take when we're talking about skill, that's going to take time. So setting up super high expectations of what that quality is from the beginning may be detrimental, may actually be something that kills the enthusiasm and the, you know, what they wanted to accomplish. And they were all on board on it, no? The same way that Sandro was mentioning before, no, like if I have, you know, a small team and then SonarQube is failing every 5 minutes, you know, it's like, for me, that's kind of like a similar context, right? It's like you need to understand where that lever is, no, and where do you need it, and it's not about sacrificing in order to, no, it's you need to be strategic as well about how you are how you're using it, no. And I feel like, especially people who are getting into, you know, extreme programming practices, they tend to have like a very dogmatic approach to a lot of these things. Like it's this, and you know, we take it to the extreme, which is like the no, the original idea. No, we take these things to the extreme, right? But then you realize that, you know, with experience, sometimes you don't have to take them to the extreme, right? And it will work as well, right? And that's something that I feel is part of the conversation as well, no?
I think, as you were saying, I was thinking in my head, I had a mental model of different levels of quality, where the lower levels of quality, they need to feed something higher. So for example, we were talking about test automation. So there is value on its own in terms of speeding up how predictable and fast our test. There is value on that, but they contribute to a higher level of quality. Right, so that we want, okay, so if we want to ship our systems faster, then we could do that. And then there is the whole lead time and at all, like from an idea to software in production and so on and so forth. So imagine a pyramid of needs, let's say, and you have quality everywhere. And sometimes, the example you were giving was exactly what I was actually taking notes in here, is sometimes we say, oh, or we feel pressure that we need to relax the quality on the small. And we feel bad about it. Oh, but are we not doing this thing that we should do, this massive re-engineering or re-architecture, blah, 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 because this area is not so good. But at the expense of what? So if we are focusing too much in one area, are we having a local optimization? So we are over-engineering in the small, spending far more time than we should at the expense of a higher thing. So sometimes you say, you know what? Let this thing a bit shit right now, because in terms of priorities, in terms of quality even, and this is what I was thinking, that I didn't think like that before. If you look at the quality at a higher level, sometimes quality for the business would be to release a feature faster for a set of clients and position their product in a better place according to the expectations of the market. And this will have a better perception of quality, not only internally, but even externally from their clients.
Yeah.
At the expense of accumulating some technical data in the small. But then there's a trade-off in quality. So this is what I think I just realized now. We are not trading quality off. So I don't want quality. You are just emphasizing quality in a different area, if you think about that. Yeah. And de-emphasize on another.
Yeah, you're kind of prioritizing one perspective over another, basically.
Yeah.
Right. And you know, we originally, when we talked about, there are many perspectives, but they don't live independently. These perspectives have a impact on each other, and you have to balance the level or the rigor or the investment in each one of those areas in order to achieve one holistic goal. Right?
As long as we do that consciously as well, right? So we need to understand that although we are favoring right now compliance to a new regulation or releasing a set of features that are really important to our clients because they are struggling to use our system well because some deficiencies or from lack of capabilities in our system. So that is quality at that level, right? Of remaining in business in case of regulations or even satisfying our end users, because their perception of quality is important. But then it needs to be a conscious decision that we are accumulating technical debt in certain areas. But it's a So I'm just conscious that we've been going for an hour now. So we started with how to measure quality. So should we, at what level should we measure quality? At all levels? Like, what is our summary here?
Well, I think you said it right. There is I don't even think about it quality at different levels. I think holistically we need to understand what we are trying to achieve, what the goal is, right? And all these things that you mentioned at the lowest level, your test coverage, and other levels like lead time and so on. And you said there is a composable quality to them, right? The lower, I think of those, I wouldn't mention them as quality. I would see them as metrics or measures that help you at a lower level kind of know earlier that we are going in the right direction for the next high level, and that will help you see that we are going in the right direction for the next high level, because you want earlier feedback. You don't want to look at just the lead time and be too late for that feature, or that you were too late and you can't understand what went wrong, right? So you basically, it's about this observability of the whole flow of the whole system, that you're carefully picking and evolving on these measures that help you see the full picture, and then help you use the levers so that you can address certain things in order for you to achieve the overall goal. So I think that, from me, that's the summary, is that there is a composable quality to these metrics that you're going to choose them very carefully, and always see that the whole is much more important than the parts. And so don't locally optimize, always keep an eye on the whole, but then also look at the details on how you will see these things early and often.
I want to add something, because in all of this conversation we've focused mostly in, let's say, an internal perspective to quality, and it is as important as the external one, although we haven't discussed as much now, like what is quality from the point of view of your client, or your user, and so on. And those are areas that you should be looking at. And it don't just look internally. Of course, this is a lot of what you can affect, but you can also do this if you're looking at your customer, And for these, there are surveys. You can, in some examples, we've used reviews in the Apple Store and the Google Play Store, just to have some measure of, okay, so do they think it's crap, or and again, these are all things. The important thing is you start somewhere, and that you build from that, and as you were saying before, Sandro, you need to start, and SonarQube is the easiest thing because the scale, and you need to stop the bleeding, etc. Do that, but don't stay there, right? Continue moving, understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish, understand how quality and the different perspectives of quality will help you get there, and build on top of those successes, right? And eventually you'll get there,
Yeah, what I was saying is like, if you have quality metrics at the low level, just make sure that they contribute to a metric at a higher level, because quite often I see also an obsession with metrics at the low level. But I said, okay, so even if we have more story points per sprint, or if we have more certain metrics on SonarQube looking better, what does it even mean, right? So in the big scheme of things, in the business context, what does it mean? And quite often, a lot of organizations that are obsessed with the low-level metrics, they don't have the metrics at the high level. You ask them, for example, what is your lead time? They don't know. Or what is the lead time of each aspect of your process? They don't know. So I think that they also should put more effort in understanding what they want to achieve at the higher level, so that the metrics at the lower level become useful metrics to contribute to that goal, and also use metrics to more as an indicator of areas that you want to improve, not as like you need to reach those numbers and stuff. It's more like, as things go off a bit, as an indicator, okay, this is an area that we might need to pay attention and see what's going on in there. So it is as information and not like a management tool. I think that's another important aspect.
Okay, so then being conscious of time, I think we should probably close it here. This is a topic that, of course, we could be talking about for hours. We didn't go into
indeed.
We didn't go a lot into the roles and how this stuff gets implemented in the organization, that kind of stuff, right? So we can probably do other sessions on it. Before we go, remember, if you liked it, there's plenty of other episodes that we've done so far, plus content in the Caduceus channel related to a lot of these practices and things that we've discussed. And of course, remember to like, subscribe, so that you get the notifications when we publish another episode, and see you in the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.